Magnus Carlsen takes on Shakhriyar Mamedyarov in this encounter between WR Chess and Kazakhstan Chess. We have Kazakhstan Chess having Mamedyarov, Swidler, Grishchuk, a very strong team, but the WR Chess team is simply epic. Magnus Carlsen, Jan Krzysztof Duda, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, Pragnananda. It's a fantastic team there. Magnus coming early for the game, adjusting his pieces like he always does, and the game begins and Shak enters right at the final second, and off we go. He starts the clock and Magnus opens the game with 1 e4. Mamedyarov generally plays e5. Let's see what he chooses today. Magnus and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov have had many interesting fights between each other, and will this be another one in e4 e5 territory is to be seen. Shak plays e5, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop b5 played, the Ruy Lopez a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and now Magnus has played d3 against the open Ruy Lopez, but this time he castles, which means he's clearly come prepared for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov's open Ruy Lopez. Because Shak is known for this opening, he's played it in many games, and there you see a small little Magnus touch there with queen e2. The main moves are c3 and knight bd2. Now knight c5 attacking the bishop here on b3. Magnus brings his rook to d1. That's the main idea of queen e2, that you free up the d1 square for the rook. Shak takes the bishop, Magnus takes back with the pawn, opening up the rook on a1. And now there are threats of c4 here, making use of this pin, but Mamedyarov does not care about it. He just plays bishop e7. Magnus plays c4, b4 played. This has been played before by Shakhriyar. Here one of the lines goes take, queen d3, and this is the way in which one of Shakhriyar's game ended in a draw, but Magnus chooses the most ambitious move, knight d2, and now trying to move the knight away from f1 to not just g3 but also e3, putting more pressure on the d5 point. Mamedyarov castles here after 3 minutes of thought, so he's out of his prep. Magnus has 13 minutes on the clock. He brings his knight back to f1. This pin here is quite irritating because you can't move the queen, you lose the d5 pawn. But Mamedyarov plays queen d7 with the idea of bringing the f rook to d8. Also notice how the a rook cannot join in because the a6 pawn is a bit weak. So bishop g5 is a good move here, and now he plays rook f d8. Now important move here is knight e3. The game can get very complex after d4, knight d5, bishop takes, queen d3 threatening a check here, g6 and f4. This is all well known theory, and so Magnus is calculating here. Not well known theory, but this is the main line of the engine and has been played once before, but instead Magnus takes instead of knight e3, and Shakhriyar takes back with the bishop. The pin is of course irritating, but there is no way to increase the pressure, and next move I'm going queen e6. So knight comes out to e3, and here Mamedyarov can play queen e6, which is a fine move, but he can also take on f3, after which the queen is attacked, and he does it. He takes, queen takes f3, and one of the games before had continued here with queen e8, but Mamedyarov perhaps improves upon it and plays queen e6, which is a little more active. Magnus takes on e7, and now of course you have to take with the knight, or else you will be simply a piece down. So knight takes e7. If you count the number of pawns, it's equal for the time being, but Magnus has these weaknesses to play with a6, b4, c7, but his own b3, b2 pawns are weak. He comes in queen to b7. a6 pawn is under pressure. Shakhriyar takes on e5, and now there are some back rank issues here on the last rank. Let's see how Magnus takes advantage of it. He takes queen takes a6, nice little move there. Rook takes e6 is impossible because of rook d8, checkmate. And rook takes d1, rook takes d1, rook a6 also does not work because of rook d8 mate. So here Mamedyarov is thinking, he goes rook takes d1 first, rook takes d1 and brings his rook to f8. Now the b2 pawn is under pressure, so that should be taken care of, and let's see how Magnus deals with that issue. The position for the time being looks equal but not drawish, because the thing is b4 is weak, c7 is weak, so white does have some trump cards here. Like for example, if you take here, I can take on c7 and b4 looks more weak than b3 after queen c4 back. But in the game, Shakhriyar plays c5, Magnus plays his typical little move g3, making a luft for his king, and Shakhriyar also does the same with h6. He's also making a small little hole for the king there. How can Magnus try to put a little bit of more pressure here? This tournament has been all about Magnus trying to convert small advantages, and that happens at the highest level of chess because the players are so well prepared these days in the openings that the positions are around equal even when you go into an endgame. So here king g2, just little waiting move, improving the position, and because your opponents are so well prepared, you have to grind with small advantages. Like here queen c7 played. As we see, queen takes b2 wouldn't work because of queen c5 hitting the knight and the pawn. So being a little passive is better. Queen c7 here. And now Magnus, you can see, goes around trying to look at other games. This is a very important part of playing in a team. When you are playing in a team, you would want to know whether you should press in such a position or is a draw fine in the tournament situation. And perhaps for Magnus, he saw that maybe it's good to keep it going here. h4 played, and this is now a very cool move because you want to play h5 and clamp down this structure. Many times we think, what's the use of a move like h5? Are we creating any threat or not? But turns out that such moves are very useful in the long run because this one pawn clamps down the entire black king side. Shakhriyar brings his queen up to c6, gives a check. Magnus comes back, and now do you want to trade the queens somehow? Queen e6 could be an idea. He plays it, queen to e6. This does spoil his structure a bit because after Magnus will take on e6, it will spoil the structure. There will be one more pawn island that will be created. And also you will notice that after queen e6, fe6, this h5 pawn does clamp the black pawns. Rook d6 played. Maybe better was rook d7 or knight c4 because this allows knight f5, which is a very cool move by Shakhriyar. Main point being, if you play rook e6, take, and rook d8 threatening rook d2 is a fantastic move. So now Magnus needs to once again think, because rook d6 did look pretty strong attacking the e6 pawn, but it doesn't look like it has led to the desired result here. Shakhriyar is coming close to a draw, especially in the rook endgames. So Magnus now thinking about whether to take, but if you take ef5, doesn't seem much. White's only trump card there would be the fact that he has been able to clamp two pawns with his one pawn on h5. And here Magnus decides to take, pawn takes, and brings his rook to d5. Mamedyarov pushes the pawn to c4, Magnus takes it, rook takes c4. Now if you take the pawn. There is rook b2, rook c2 trying to win the b2 pawn. So he goes to b5, f4 played, king comes up to g2, and now we are facing an equal number of pawns here, 3 pawns versus 3. Maybe a draw is very, very imminent. King f7. You can see the confidence that Shak has. He has 4 minutes on the clock. Magnus has 2 minutes. So this will end in a draw. f4 played. We're waiting for Shakhriyar to make his move here. He plays king to f6. You see, the only reason why Magnus is interested to still continue playing here is because of the h5 pawn. How useful it has become. By the way, here he goes rook d4, waiting in the position, and Magnus pushes b3. Here a good idea could be g5, because this is threatened, and hg6, king g6 is just a draw. So maybe a good idea is to play g5 in this position, but Shakhriyar is thinking a bit and plays king e6. It's also a fine move, no problem there. Magnus plays rook to b8. Somehow Magnus's moves often in such endgames are a little bit deep to understand, but I think what he wants is after king f6, he wants to come to b7 and tell his opponent that there is a small zugzwang like situation. King f6, yes, rook b7, but there isn't any zugzwang. I can play here, but then you have to be careful about something like this, and then you lose your b4 pawn. But you can go rook d5 and pick up the h5 pawn, so it's possible. But he goes king e6, and Magnus says thank you so much for giving me the pawn, but Shakhriyar says thank you so much for giving me the b3 pawn. But you know, this wasn't required, because now Magnus gets an extra pawn, 2 pawns on the king side. It's not easy, but still now he has something to play for. Rook b1. This is a draw, but not at all a trivial one now. How did Magnus manage to put pressure on Shakhriyar is a major question there. We saw it all unfold in front of our eyes, and it does happen with Magnus that he is able to make his opponents wilt under pressure. Now taking his time to find the best way to press in the position, goes king f5. Shakhriyar says I'm going to push my pawn, but now check, pushing the king back to the last rank. Makes a lot of sense. Check. King goes back. Well, if you go king g6 trying to threaten a mate, there's a check coming in. So he goes king f6 with the shelter of the f pawn, so there's no checks here. And now b2 still. In the background you can see Pragnananda, Swidler, everyone waiting for the game. b2 played. This game is an important one which could decide between the match ending in a win for WR Masters, WR chess team, or a draw. Check. King h7 and pushes f5. Now very important for Mamedyarov is to go rook a1 here, so that after takes, king h6, very important move here, and then waiting on the long side. This is a draw. This is a draw here, but he blunders with rook h1, a very, very big mistake, a huge mistake. And now Magnus has to find the way to win this. He takes his time. He will calculate. He has 2 minutes to work this out. The pressure has got to Mamedyarov. Rook h1 was a mistake. He should have gone rook a1 or rook c1 to check from the long side. But rook h1, he wants to win the h5 pawn first. Magnus takes. Rook takes and gives a check. Very important that you can't go back here because of king g6. So king here threatening a mate, and Mamedyarov comes back king h7. He feels that this is a draw, but in fact this is winning. King e6, fantastic move here. He goes down in order to give a check, but f6. Now he must give a check because the threat is f7 with f8 queen. So check, king f7, and Magnus knows this position is winning. Look at his expression there. He already knows it, taking the long side, but that's not going to help because king f8, f7 is game over. Yes, he plays king f8, and look at Mamedyarov. He's just simply stopped in his tracks. Suddenly he feels like, oh my god, what did I do here? How did I land up in this position? And Magnus Carlsen, from absolutely nothing, has converted this game into a win. A stunned Mamedyarov continues to look at the board. If this is not sorcery, what is? This is endgame wizardry at its best. Magnus Carlsen showing why they call him the endgame GOAT. From absolutely nothing, he managed to create something and is winning. Mamedyarov now makes rook a7, but you can simply push the pawn because after king g6, there is rook b6 check. And there is no way you can cling on to the f7 pawn. I mean, as black, there's no way to win that pawn. So, Magnus just making sure that is everything under control. This is one thing that we can all learn from Magnus is, although he knows sometimes what the right move is, he takes his time to calculate opponent's possibilities. King at 7, and now rook to e6 makes sense, because if you play king e8 here, that would be a mistake. Rook a8, and this is a draw. This is a well-known drawing position. So rook e6 is a fantastic move, because now if you give a check, then I can just play rook e8, and if you come rook a7, I can go rook d8 with the idea of king e8 and making a queen. So he plays here check, rook e8, and now after rook a7 he comes rook e1, threatening rook h1 check, check king e7, and it's all over because after check king f6 check, there is rook e6, and that's the reason why Shakhriyar resigns. Another unbelievable win for Magnus Carlsen, truly the endgame GOAT.